Spurgeon was known as the Prince of the Preachers and one of the most influential men of the Victorian age. He is perhaps the greatest preacher that the Christian church has known since the time of the Apostle Paul. He was born in 1834 and he died in 1892. So he lived across the whole span of the Victorian age and built in his time not only the world's largest church, but also a series of institutions that would have their effect on the whole English-speaking world and ultimately the entire world. His sermons, some 9,000 of them produced in his lifetime, were spread by pamphlet and book all over the world, literally, instantly transmitted to America and Australia by the highest technological means available to the Victorians at the time. So he was a man who had a tremendous amount of insight into the work of the ministry, which is why the insights that he gave to his preacher boys, the young men who attended his pastor's college, which was founded in 1852, why those insights were so incisive and so helpful. Every Friday afternoon, he would gather all of the men of the college together into a chapel, and he would share his folk wisdom, his practical experience, and his incisive mind in a series of lectures that were ultimately gathered together and published in 3 series, the first of which is an acclaimed classic, Lectures to My Students. In that first series covers the whole range of the internal life and the external life of the minister. But the value of the book goes far beyond just a guidebook for prospective ministers. If you're a teacher, if you are responsible to teach a Sunday school class, if you have classroom responsibilities in an elementary school or a high school, if you ever have to make a presentation for your business, if you ever have to manage a crew, Spurgeon has insights that are invaluable for all of us. It's one of the reasons why Lectures to My Students, particularly that first series, has not only remained in print, but in multiple versions and multiple formats since it was first made available to the public in 1875. It is brilliant and incisive. It is sometimes hilarious, oftentimes folksy, and its rugged humor and its practical tenor ultimately make it a useful tool even to this day. Techniques and technologies have changed dramatically since the Victorian age, but the wisdom of Spurgeon hasn't aged a bit. It's as relevant as tomorrow's newspaper. It's why Lectures to My Students belongs on iPads and Android devices, why it belongs on iPhones, and why in this very mobile age, that wisdom, those insights, those perspectives are as needed as ever before. I first ran across Lectures to My Students as a young pastor myself. In fact, the very first book I ever read as a Christian was one of Spurgeon's books, which ultimately made me a lifetime lover of all of his books. I, for years, would read one of his sermons every day. But it was in Lectures to My Students that I first began to see what it really took to have public impact, to ultimately shape and change culture, what it meant to be a leader, not only of institutions, but of people, how to love them and call out of them the best that they have and the best that they are. Spurgeon deals with all of that in Lectures to My Students. My recommendation in working through the book is that you go slow take notes. I identify and mark out those quotations which are really striking, and then look for ways to translate the folk wisdom of the Victorian age into this new day of technological advancement in the 21st century. Go plenty slow in terms of trying to digest this material, because it's not the sort of thing that can be comprehended in big gulps and in mad dashes. Instead, this is the kind of work that needs to be savored. It needs to be relished. It needs to be thoroughly digested. Look for practical ways to put into effect in your own life and work the lessons that Spurgeon has for us. And then look for ways that those that you admire most model those tidbits of wisdom that Spurgeon has. That living sort of modeling, the imitation that modern communicators have of the best of Spurgeon is the best way that we can begin to stretch and improve ourselves. Lectures to my students, especially Series 1, the first 13 chapters, is one of those undoubtable classics that belong in the library of every minister, every teacher, every thinker, and every communicator. For that reason, I am so grateful for this, the newest version, the newest application of Lectures to my students.